Well, welcome Elizabeth to the show, the Manage to Win podcast. Really glad Bill Flynn recommended you. I think this is going to be a great conversation. I really want to hear about your passions today. But before we dive into that, will you please talk about what your background is, what you're doing today as a kind of intro to the audience?
Absolutely, David. And thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation. I am currently a leadership expert. I do both coaching and consulting on a global basis. In a way, my philosophy of coaching is the philosophy of who I am. I say everything you've done that's have led you to where you are. And I started in investment banking and then became a trial lawyer out west, and then temporarily came back east and accidentally tripped into headhunting in financial services. And then sort of the thread of all of this was people and really being able to coach people. And then I became an entrepreneur myself and became a coach. And so I have that global business where I do my coaching consulting. I also do professional speaking and workshops. And I wrote a book and of course working on another like you and doing more writing. So a little bit of everything.
Yeah, that's an interesting path. Talk about the book for a moment. I'd love to learn more about that.
Sure. Well, interestingly, the first book I wrote is, I would say, a product of my legal education. I always had a dream of writing a legal thriller. So my book that is currently published is Sin and the Big Easy. It's a legal thriller that takes place in New Orleans. And then the current book I'm working on is more about my leadership philosophy, which is really about the nonlinear path and how we sort of strengths, weaknesses, but we kind of take the culmination of all of our experiences and then leverage that to do what we do. I mean, I think because of my path, I'm better at what I do. Even though at the time, sometimes you go, what's the link? So.
What do you mean by nonlinear path? Talk about that for a bit here.
Well, this is interesting. I was speaking on a panel at my alma mater, University of Maryland, to the business school, and there was myself and two other guys speaking, and the two other guys had incredible paths. They were finance majors at Maryland and then went into finance, and one was a marketing major and went into Major League Baseball and marketing. And then it was my turn, and I said, well, I did some investment banking, and then that really wasn't for me. So I thought I'd do something a little less stressful, and I went to law school.
How could law school be less stressful?
Exactly. That's the ridiculous of it, right? And so I went to law school and realized, oh boy, like blue suit isn't for me. And I moved out west to New Mexico and became a trial lawyer. And that was really fun and kind of leveraged my strengths of speaking, but of course, and writing as well. And then my father got very ill. And so I thought I would temporarily come back to New York, to the Hamptons, where I'm based and where I'm actually from. And I couldn't be a lawyer in New York. And so
why not?
Just because I was licensed in New Mexico.
Oh, okay.
And then I had to get licensed in New York. And I also practiced a different kind of law in New Mexico than I would be able to do in New York. And so, I mean, I'm glad it didn't work out for me to be a lawyer in New York, because I answered an ad they wanted someone in finance to recruit. And I said, well, recruit me. I have a business degree and a law degree. And they said, we want you to be a recruiter. And I said, well, I don't want to be a recruiter. They said, come in anyway. And every interview I went on, I said, listen, I don't want to be a recruiter. And turns out after many interviews, I liked the people and I thought I could make a go of it. And for almost 20 years, I was one of probably the top recruiter in my office in financial services. Wow. And had a long time reputation, when I still do in the industry in financial services, and was in magazines and whatnot. And then I decided, what's next? What do I need to learn next? And someone said, why don't you try coaching? And I thought, well, that's ridiculous. But I met this coach. I was just talking to her today. I told her this story. I met this coach. A friend of mine in New Mexico recommended her. And I said, coaching's ridiculous, but I need a change. And I met this woman and I thought, wow, she's a MBA and owned a business. And now she's a coach. And as a self-motivated individual, I thought, what do I need a coach for? But I just thought this woman was incredible. And I said, I have to work with her. I don't know what this is about. And soon after I started working with her, things started to change. I even got a TEDx. I got my book rolling, other things with business. And I said, I'm going to do exactly what she did. So I didn't do any research. I just copied her because she was very smart. And so I got the coach training, which I said would make me a better recruiter, when we both know I was just on the path to, in a way, retooling myself to do what I do now.
Yeah. So I'm curious, you've got this background of talking with a wide variety of people, and now you're coaching, working with different types of people. What is your typical client that you work with?
I have this one rule now after so many years in business. I always say I work with good people. I work in interesting projects and good people, and that is my number one first. If something is I'm never intimidated by what industry. I actually just wrote a piece for my new book about niche, when everyone says you must niche, niche. And I think that might be good for some people, but it's not for me. I have a more diverse interest range. And so I leverage that in my work. So I work with people who want to elevate what they're doing. So I always say I don't work with people who are failing. I mean, you could fail, but it's about get back up and try again. I work with people who are really trying to get out of their comfort zone and do something more, be it next level job or make some kind of an impact. So I just myself, I'm self-motivated person. I love someone who is willing to take a really hard look at themselves and be honest about what's working and what's not working, and try and, I'm not going to say fix, because I never say I fix you. I just say you make tweaks to do better, to reach further, to take some calculated risk. And that really excites me. So like I said, I work with scientists, I work with engineers, I work with entrepreneurs, I work with a wide variety of people. And the one commonality is that ethic of hard work and determination and willingness to fail as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. It reminds me of Zig Ziglar's comment, you can't make a good deal with a bad guy. So right. You're only going to work with good people. And can you give us an example of how you've taken someone from point A to point B?
Sure. I think, gosh, I have a lot of really interesting clients. I have one that I think of in particular as an executive who really was, when I met this person, I said, this is an exceptional individual. And I was thrilled. We had a connection. I was thrilled to work with him. And he had been actually passed over for a position twice. And together we decided that, so one of the goals was, they wanted that position, but we had to take that goal off the table and just become a leader known within the organization, and not just the person that was after that one job. And this was a year-long process together, but ended up that he got the new position, and also ended up, it sort of almost brings me to tears, became leader of the year in his organization. And
yeah, interesting.
Yeah. And I have to say, to see your client just be appreciated and shine for all their hard work. I mean, there is no better reward. And trust me, he did the work.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. Instead of focusing on this object, he made himself better and moved ahead. Yeah. In this time that's so uncertain for leaders, and you're working with a variety of people. I mean, we've got COVID, and there's people that think it's, going to kill us all. And we've got people that think it's just basically got the impact of a flu, and everything in between. And then we've got government shutdowns, and we've got so many things that are hitting us at once. It's like a tsunami. Is
Yeah.
there any passion you have right now that you're just wishing somebody heard a particular message or was doing a certain thing? I mean, you're a leader. You've got this nonlinear path where you've got these different touch points that many people don't have. Maybe I'm putting you on the spot, but I'm curious, is there something when you're talking to people and you move on to that subject, all of a sudden you just light up and that's really what you want to talk about?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, that passion is that, this COVID time and this challenge meant that the goals that you had in January are probably not the goals that have remained through the end of the year. I mean, like you said, the whole world has turned upside down. And, my business too, things that we're supposed to meet in person are now virtually. And my passion is, it's funny, like I said, I just wrote this chapter that I met someone and they said, well, I always do this, like, this is what I do. And I said, well, that is actually off the table now. That business is no longer there. I love that you worked hard for that, but it is no longer there. So how can you pivot? And I think having a more expansive mindset, that's sort of taking an accounting of all those skills. Like myself, I have all these skills and I have a lot of diversity in my business. So when one door closed, I was okay because I had, 7 or 8 other doors open. But if you only have that micro focus on that one thing and it goes away, that's a panic sets in. And I think I have a lot of compassion for that because it's hit certain industries a lot harder. When you sell something specific or you're in hospitality, but can you take a look at the diversity in your experience? Because we're not ever really new. I mean, when you're younger, you can be new and fresh, but you can really take all that experience and try and test. And it's a great time for experimentation. I know people need money, so of course you've got to do something that makes your rent or pays your mortgage. I mean, I'm also a realist, but I think that to try and think more expansively, which is non-linearly about the breadth of your experience, means doors close, doors open, but you're not left with nothing in the end. So to really be diverse and not so singularly focused that when that one thing falls apart, you're left with nothing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was reading a morning report this morning it used to be called 21 Hats. I forget what they're called now, but they do a great job. And one of the stories they brought up was this guy, Chris Middlestat, who started a fresh produce delivery business like 30 years ago. Mm. And I actually met him when he was starting. He was doing the door-to-door, sales. And he started in my area. And he was on track now 30 years later to be at $40 million in his business. He had grown it. He had found his niche of delivering to schools and to business. Okay. Well, guess what went away with the pandemic?
I know.
So, boom, he's been just hit and he's trying to pivot as best he can, but it's not easy. Particularly when the government, like here in California, Newsom shut us down again. Did the broad shutdown, and this pivot thing is huge. I think you're right. And it's a big challenge. And I think that one of the things that someone like yourself can do and others like us is provide that third party sounding board where we don't have skin in the game, their game.
That's right.
And they need ideas. They don't need necessarily ideas from us, but really to draw out from them. Is that been in your experience, to draw out the
Absolutely.
thoughts that they haven't been willing to think about or haven't thought of?
You make me think of this. I met a woman a week or so ago and has a business in New York City that has been really, really hit by, it's connected to hospitality, really hit. And at first I said, she was referred to me. I said, first of all, don't hire me because you can't right now. However, I said, I was using this tool and I said, let's just do this. I'm going to do this for you. We're going to do this leadership tool. We're going to look at your strengths, and then it's just going to give you information so that you can take it with you and do what you will. Because really, a very talented talented leader, but of course, business was really wiped out. And so we did this, we did this assessment, a leadership assessment. And I know, and I asked her what she walked away from, and she goes, I just walked away with confidence that like, I do have all these strengths and I can do this. And I said, yeah, you're just so resilient, but had forgotten how resilient she was. And so it was really, and I gave her a couple of recommendations of, books. I have a book here that I read, Dark Horse, or I don't know if you read the book Range, which is about the theory of generalists thrive over people who niche.
Oh, yeah.
But by David Epstein. But I think that was just what I could do for her, is to kind of hold space for her like you said, for me, it doesn't matter what you do. I always say that to my clients, I don't care what the goal is, as long as you care. And if you care, I care that you care. So, and I think I was able to kind of give her just a different perspective on what some of her strengths were and how she might be able to leverage that in a different way. And part of it was approaching a few people. It's tough when your business is severely hit by the pandemic. How do you talk about it? It can be embarrassing.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think, have you also found, I'm finding some of my clients need to make some quicker decisions than what they're doing. Some of them kind of knew this when it first hit, and they made some quick decisions, but now there's some other decisions they need to make. It's on process, it's on people, and it has to also do with hiring those that, do have some revenue. There are some great people out there. There's also a huge amount of people that maybe are less qualified or less a good fit, and how to choose them. Think back to your recruiting days, right? We're not, it was feast, it was famine for a long time in hiring, finding that good person. All of a sudden, now you put it on an ad, and once again, you've got 300 resumes. And
many overqualified. I think that, I felt that too when I was kind of going from lawyer and moving back east. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm overqualified, and I'm also willing to hustle. I always say, no matter what, I know I can do anything. We've done some construction on our house, and I learned how to lay radiant floor. And I go, gosh, if it all goes south, I'll do radiant flooring. I'll do anything. So it's like willing to do any job. I had some really creative jobs in my lifetime, and it's just like, how much are you willing to work? It may not be sometimes you're looking for the perfect job, and I don't know, what's the perfect job? When people say what they want next, I say, you got to take a longer view. Like, what do you want in 10 years? What do you want that to look like? What are those elements of what kind of impact you want to make? And then work backwards. Because if you say, I want, these 10 criterion to work with, then you may be looking for a long time. And like you said, it's much more nimble right now. You've got to be quick, and that's pretty scary. Yeah. I mean, you have to be quick on some decisions, but you also have to be careful that you make the right decision, because a wrong decision is costly, and you don't have the depth of funds that maybe you had before. Right. And often the case. And what's your feeling on this remote work situation? I mean, so many commercial buildings are empty, or a lot emptier right now. Yeah. Will people return to work? Will we stay in this remote phase? What are your thoughts on that, based on what's going on with you and your clients? I think we're going to continue to be online. And I think futuristically, I think it will become a hybrid. I think that there are some people that probably won't go back to the office, and some, it's already happening in Silicon Valley. Some are saying, no, work permanently at home. But I think for the rest of us, and unless you're a business that really requires that person to be on site, I think it's going to become very much a hybrid, and we're going to continue to do virtual workshops and virtual meetings and find this balance of what works. I definitely agree. I think that's exactly the word I used when I was asked that question recently. And I think that there are going to be people that return to the office. I think the hybrid model we'll see a lot of times is
somebody works from home 3 or 4 days a week and comes in 1 or 2 days a week. And I think we'll see the meetings and conventions come back once the fears are gone.
Yeah.
And I think that'll be healthy. You know?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I do seminars and speaking engagements, and I'm glad that was just a piece of my business because that really dried up for now.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think some of it though, interestingly, like next week I'm doing an all day event that I would have been in person for, and we're doing it 100% online. And I do wonder if sometimes those events will happen because in a way they're more cost efficient for people. You don't have to have a hotel. You don't have to have, you miss the networking element of it. But if you plan it right, and you don't make it all the time, but you could have some high benefit to that depending on the event.
That's true. And I do have some clients. I actually read this and recommended it to clients. And so it wasn't my idea. But I encouraged them. I said, have a meeting once a month. That's a virtual meeting. It can be during work hours, after work hours. And you can even order everyone's dinner and have it delivered to their house.
That's so,
or let them order their own thing and expense it to the company. And I've got one client, WCA Technologies in New York City. They're a great managed service provider, IT managed service provider, been around for 30 plus years. And they're doing that, once every month or two. And they're getting together for an hour or two, and they're just bantering. They're just talking about what anybody wants to talk about,
Yeah, that's the one thing. I do a couple of groups during this time. Since from March till now, I have a project that is a big global organization, and I have 5 to 6 people in a group, and we have 5 meetings. And one of the issues that always comes up is that there's no water cooler talk right
Exactly.
now. There's no walking by someone's desk and solving a problem in 5 minutes. You've got to schedule. You got to schedule a meeting. And one advice one of the guys said, which I thought was brilliant, and I always say that, does a meeting really have to be 60 minutes? Can it be 45? Can it be 30? Can it be 15? Can it be a 10-minute check-in? You don't have to have like an hour set aside. I mean, give people their time back and learn how to be efficient.
That's right. And I actually recommend to my clients that instead of doing a half an hour meeting, do a 25-minute meeting. Instead of an hour, do a 50-minute meeting. So you have 5 minutes, 10 minutes to go get something to drink or check your email or whatever you want to do in between meetings. Don't book them back to back. Because also then if somebody you have to stay on a little bit longer, then you're late for the next one and you're just stressed and harder to focus, harder to be on track. So I do look forward to when do
you hear the background noise? I apologize.
I don't hear anything.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. Home office, background noise.
No problem.
Good.
So I'm curious, what other things are you finding are top of mind for your clients or in your heart today for leaders? Where are we missing the mark, need to focus more on to be the best leader we can be?
Well, one of the things that, I guess 2 things that continue to pop up is feedback. And I don't mean just giving and receiving feedback. Are you a leader that people feel okay to give feedback, or are you a leader and you ask a question and people head nod you? How'd I do in that? Oh, great. Like, how do you elicit honest feedback? And also, how do you react when you get that feedback? Because there can be an occasion where you ask for the feedback, but you don't really want the constructive feedback. You want the accolade kind of feedback. So are you eliciting proper feedback, and are you giving feedback? So I always tell people to be specific with that. Like, not how did I do? How did it go? But to say, gosh, I really thought that went well, but I was thinking this part of it, I don't know if it got the point. What did you sense? To be really specific when asking with feedback, especially when you have a head nod crowd.
Are you finding that works best to do this verbally, or are there other methods? I do have a client or 2 that are doing confidential surveys, online surveys to their people.
I think it depends. I think you can do, I say, don't just do one thing. It's also very much an experiment because it depends on you and who you are. and it depends on the group and who they are. And something that worked last week, something else happens, it might not work. So, sort of collect things for your toolbox and understand that everyone receives feedback differently and everyone gives feedback differently. So how do you unlock that key for that?
Absolutely true. I totally agree. I talk about adapting to the other person's behavioral style. So
Exactly. Yeah. You have to know how someone likes to receive feedback and act. Like some people like a pat on the back and some people really don't care. That's not motivating for them.
yeah, very true. And what do you find happens when a leader gets feedback and then doesn't act on it?
Oh, well, that's actually probably the worst. If you ask for feedback and then you ignore the feedback, then I would say that people do not like that. People do not like that. And I think it's really important. And when I'm working with someone, there's a couple elements of how to get feedback. We could do a 360. I also do interviews, and then I do follow-up check-in, and to get that how am I doing feedback. So there's some accountability in there, because if you just get the feedback and you put it on a shelf and don't do anything with it, then people start to get resentful. That's how you can actually damage the culture of your team if you're not sincere about really getting feedback. So, what's your purpose? I would ask, what's the purpose behind your feedback? You just want, I did a great job, or are you going to do something about it? Because you're really going to affect the team if you just shelve it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's almost worse to ask and don't do anything than not ask at all.
Think about it. I'd say a polite term is like when someone asks you a question, when you give someone the answer to the question they ask and they totally ignore it, then you're like, well, forget it. I'm never wasting my time again. Somebody who asks your opinion and then completely dismisses it and does something different. You do that a couple times and then you're like, oh, I don't know. So you actually make the effect of, someone actually steps back and just watches things happen and doesn't contribute. And as leaders, I think that's irresponsible to act like that.
What are your clients doing with these sensitive topics we've got going on today? We have topics that are pandemic, the virus, good or bad. We have race. We have government, doing too much, doing too little, not getting it right, getting it whatever. We have all these different things going on. How are your clients handling these conversations, these difficult conversations?
Yeah.
With their employees and when appropriate with their customers or clients?
It's a really tough one because there's a lot of really challenging ones. And can give you an example of the group I had last week. Someone said, what do I do? Because I want to help. And I'm a middle-aged white male. And how do I have that dialogue when I am part of the problem? And there was actually a wonderful article by a Wharton professor, I think Stephanie Creary, as how to be an ally to your Black colleagues. And I thought it was a really valuable article because really you can't ignore it, but you have to really, it's sensitive. You have to listen. You have to actually educate yourself in a different way. I think it's responsible to educate yourself, not just ask questions of others, but to really educate yourself and read and try and broach it with sensitivity and understanding and humbleness, because you can't ignore it now. But it is very, very challenging. I think particularly, all of them are pretty challenging. I mean, people have, even we talk about COVID, people have different challenges. If you're a parent and you have kids and the kids aren't back in school and you're close to experiencing burnout, I've had my clients say, well, what do I do? I think some of my employees are close to burning out. Like, what do I do? And so it's really sort of an elevated sense of responsibility is how are you going to be sensitive to those matters, not pander or be, just, you have to be sincere. I think you have to really put in a little extra effort to do your homework and to listen and to self-eval, like how have you been contributing or not in those spaces. I think it's hard.
Yeah, in a similar way, I'm seeing some of my clients just have the conversation. So
It's
they
the
have the
elephant in the room,
conversation.
really.
They do a little teeing up, hey, we wanted to have a conversation about race. This is obviously a sensitive issue, particularly after the murder of George Floyd and
Mm-hmm.
the way that whole went, and just, and then saying, who wants to talk?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't necessarily have any answers, but I'm here to listen. I'm here to learn and kind of just have that. It's been interesting to see some of the different groups out there that already have some materials. I found one on Facebook called Be the Bridge. She also wrote a book.
That.
Yeah, that one looks pretty good. I joined that and I'm kind of working through it. And in the conversations I've had, when people ask, well, what's your objective for this conversation? To date, so far, I'm just saying, I'm just here to learn. I just want to love people, want to have good relationships. And so I'm really just trying to learn. So I think, I think leaders can do that and not have to. So often leaders feel like they have to have the answer.
That's exactly right. Sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. And I think I have several clients that are, persons of color. And I think some of it is also, it's tough on that side too, because what you want to be known for is just being excellent at your job, not excellent because you're African American or you're an excellent woman leader or, not labeled. You just want to be excellent, excellent David, excellent Elizabeth, not, who you are. So I think that's a challenge too, because, some that I felt put in this position that is also uncomfortable to be a leader in a space when really it's, it's also challenging to be put in that position as well. So to have compassion for that too, like you said, that to opening the door to conversation, I think it's also tiring too or just, again, we're going to have this conversation, but maybe we're listening better. I hope that everything that has happened has made us really open our eyes to listen better and to really be compassionate to people and what's going on in all levels of what we're talking about.
Yes, I totally agree. And I like what you say about, we don't want to think of someone as black or white or Hispanic or Asian or male or female. One person put it in a conversation I was in, we are one race. We're the human race.
Yeah.
So we're not this race or that race. We are the human race. And yet we're trying to put everything in these labels or these buckets of, here's this black view, white view, Hispanic view, whatever it might be. And there was one nice little article I saw in USA Today about the American Airlines CEO was flying on a Southwest flight, and he was reading a book on race and wearing his mask. And there was a flight attendant, black flight attendant woman, who there was about 30 minutes left in the flight. And she sat down next to him and she said, "So what do you think of the book?" And then they had this very candid conversation that, was neat. It's just both people open, both people hurting a bit, both people trying to figure out what they do. And, it's just a touch. If we can just put relationships first and try to heal, it would be great. So,
right. And some understanding, like the compassion, like somebody's trying, genuinely trying.
Yeah. And I think that's what we as leaders have to do. We have to let people know we care, but we don't have to have all the answers. And then, as you said, we have to listen and be prepared that when there's some consensus, take some action.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, I feel like we're just getting comfortable. We're rolling, but are there any closing thoughts you have for our leaders? And also, please let people know if they want to learn more about what you do, where to find your book, learn more about you, where they can find more information.
Oh, absolutely. So I am under, it's McCourt Leadership Group. And so you can find me there. I'm on Instagram and on LinkedIn if someone wants to connect on LinkedIn. And we're connected on LinkedIn. That's so that way. And I would say that I guess for me to be my book is on Amazon. If you want to read a mystery, if one of your readers reaches out, I'll send 3 complimentary books. I will mail them to 3 of your readers if they need a beach read or a COVID break read. I'm happy to do that. I always like to
That's
do
great.
that. Just give a few away. I'll sign them and I'll mail them to you. That's on Amazon, sending the Big Easy. And hopefully, fingers crossed, I know you're writing too, that I finish a draft and then maybe mid to end of next year, I'll have my business book out. And it might be business memoir, it might be, I'm not sure yet. It's evolving as we speak.
Okay. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. My final thought is just, I think if everyone just think more expansively about your strengths, especially during this time, especially as an entrepreneur. Can you be a little more expansive? Can you take a little bit of risk? Can you, or maybe educate yourself? I'm a big believer in self-education. Can you kind of follow your nose and read something and learn something that sparks something in your head that changes how you lead, how you work, what you do? I think it's just a wonderful opportunity to do that. I've been on a reading tear, so I said this self-education.
All right. Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth, for being with us. I really enjoyed the conversation. A lot of good things for our listeners here.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.